Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of Stop, Look, and Listen. I'm your host, LaTroy Gardner. This week, we have a freelance illustrator, a designer. He laces you with ill designs with comic books. He's getting into some canvas art. He's got hip-hop. His legacy in hip-hop, especially in the Queen City community, is cemented. We have Wolly McNair, also known as Wolly Vinyl, also known as Wolly V. Welcome to the show, Wolly.
Hey, I appreciate being here. I appreciate, like I said earlier, being even thought of, considered, you know what I mean? Greatly appreciate it.
No doubt. So Wolly is someone that I've come across a long time ago, back in the mid-2000s with the QC hip-hop scene, and he would dominate Monday night mic fights at the Room.
That's a powerful word right there, dominate.
Dominate.
Take that too lightly.
I mean, like I said, his legacy is cemented, but then we sort of we lost that presence somewhat, which we'll get into. But it's good to see that you have persevered and continue to build on your gifts. And I mean, it's amazing work. So
I appreciate that. I appreciate that for real.
All right. So you was born in Wilmington, North Carolina, but you primarily grew up in the Charlotte area. Just talk about all of that.
Yeah. So Wilmington, most people know Fayetteville. They don't know Wilmington, really. Wilmington is about 2 hours from Charlotte. And when my mom and my pop split, my aunt was already here in Charlotte. And my mom was trying to figure out a new path, a new life, a way to build and give more opportunity. So she struck out and came here. And shortly after she came here, I found myself jumping back and forth between Wilmington and Charlotte. And then I looked up one day and I had been in Charlotte longer than I had been in Wilmington. And people in Wilmington didn't consider me from Wilmington anymore. It was like, nah, you from Charlotte.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So yeah.
Dope. So like your main skill, I'm guessing, that you developed as a kid was in artistry with your designs. When did you discover your gift as an artist / creator?
Man, you know, that's the weird thing. Like I think I was just like most everybody who just grabbed a pencil or a pen and scribbled. Mm-hmm. You know, like my first vivid memories of drawing was stick people. Right. So I don't even know if it was a matter of me feeling like I had something, or if it was just this was a way to escape moments and create other things, you know what I'm saying, and tell stories. But over time, I started to push to try to, so a friend who at the time, I would have never thought he read comic books, and he probably thought the same thing about me, but he was a little bit older cat, a street cat. And we was in school one day and he came by and was like, oh, you read comics? And I'm like, I looked at the art, you know what I'm saying? And he started breaking down like how I didn't really understand art, right? And so he started showing me the difference of, at the time, Todd McFarlane was growing at Marvel as this big influence over there. And he started showing me how he drew Spider-Man, the hands, the webs, the eyes, compared to everybody else. And he was like, this is how you differentiate yourself. This is how you establish style and presence. And he didn't draw, but he just understood that concept. And from that point forward, I started looking at the world differently, which started making me really want to understand how to draw and drawing and what separated what I was doing from anybody. Not to say better than anybody, just what made me me. You know what I mean? So I think that's probably one of those key moments where I started really, I don't remember what grade it was. I just remember him teaching me that lesson, and I don't even know why he decided to teach. You know what I'm saying? He just did, and we became the best of friends after that.
Okay. So what was your favorite comic book series as a kid?
Well, you know, not having or not knowing about a lot of Black characters when I was growing up, because, you know, if you saw anything on TV, it was really Spider-Man, Superman, Batman, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I identified with Spider-Man at the time the most, because in my head, even though he was a white character, he seemed to go through things that Black people went through. You know what I'm saying? He didn't have a lot of money. He had to make decisions to do right over wrong, even if he was in bad situations at times. And he could, when you put the mask on, he really could have been anybody up under that mask. So it was like with Batman, I liked Batman, but with Batman, he was rich. I wasn't rich. He had, you could see his skin. So with Spider-Man, it was just whoever that being was behind the mask. So Spider-Man became like my go-to character during those times.
Do you feel like getting into drawing was your sort of escapism from the reality of like your parents being separated and bouncing back and forth between Lumberton and Charlotte?
I think the drawing was definitely my way of escape, but it wasn't so much the situation with my parents. It was just more the environment and the world that I was coming up in, period. You know what I mean? It was like, this is something different than what I see every day. I can kind of create and mold these worlds that are different from my surroundings. And I was big on Good Times. My great grandmother put me on the Good Times. And I always tell people, one, I was in love with Thelma. I don't know how many people remember Good Times, but I was in love with Thelma. And then JJ was always doing these elongated paintings and characters that were representation of the struggle, but they still seem to be having a good time. And she put me on to that. It was Ernie Barnes, who was an athlete, who also was a painter, who lived in North Carolina, or was from North Carolina. So it was like, wow, a Black artist from North Carolina, and his work's on TV. So all that stuff made me want to create worlds even more. You know what I mean? And it was just like, this is a chance to tell stories and escape and control the narratives of whatever these stories are, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so side note, I was able to meet Bernadette Stannis. She
Wow.
was a guest at my church in my hometown of Beaufort, South Carolina. And she stood up and introduced herself. So afterwards, I was like, yeah, I'm going to go meet her so I could try to get her on the other show that I used to do, the Good Old Boys. Yeah. And she was a pleasant person. I purchased her book that she was promoting at the time. She autographed it, and we did the interview. Right. So
wow, that's dope, man. That's super dope.
And she was still fine as hell.
I believe it. I believe it. I don't even know if she realized how important she was to so many young people growing up, and the culture back then, man. She definitely was a true definition of power, beauty, and grace. And so was the mom on the show. All the women on the show, really. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
But she was just Thelma. It was always like, yo, if I could meet Thelma, even though by the time I saw the show, the show wasn't on anymore, but in my mind, it was like, Thelma, she's still out there. I got to go find Thelma. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So you continue to hone your skills, and you attended the Art Institute of Charlotte. Just talk about that experience, the admission process, whether it was a competitive atmosphere, and how it differs from attending a typical four-year institution.
Well, you know, the Art Institute that we had in Charlotte was good and bad. It was a joke, but it was still the most serious thing at the same time. Like, they were trying to, I think they were more of a design school where they actually went in and cut fabrics and learned about the true deeper aspects of clothing and fabrics and interior and etc. So they started converting it over, but a lot of the staff was still learning, still getting certified. So it was a very interesting experience. But I just remember going and seeing the campus, and it was like, yo, I could sit out here and it's a whole nother world. Even though it was in the same city I grew up in, it just felt like a whole nother world. There's ducks swimming in the pond. There's white people walking around with their dogs, you know what I mean? And everybody here seems to be on some trying to figure it out and going to get it at the same time, you know what I mean? So when I got there, the crazy thing was I had to pay every week to be there. And it was a 2-year school. So essentially you were cramming 4 years worth of education into an accelerated program. And then you had to do a portfolio to exit. And it was very challenging and competitive. I met a lot of cats I'm still cool with to this day because we push each other to be competitive in that environment. And then the professors who were also designers, illustrators, whatever, were, you know, they were the ones, they would teach you a lot about critical thinking and how to critique to be constructive, not destructive. You know what I mean? Like, it's not enough to just say this looks terrible. Why is it terrible? Mm-hmm. What could make it better? And if you don't have that answer, is it really terrible? Or is it just you don't like it? You know what I mean? So I went there for like a year and a half, man. And right before I got in portfolio, I just got bored and frustrated with it. And I had already been freelancing. So I don't know, my mind was just like, I'm spending all this money. I'm gonna be in debt when I leave. I might as well just go out here and go for it, because I am a believer in education, but I'm also a believer that education comes in many forms, and, you know, ownership and controlling your destiny and experience are always the greatest life lessons to me.
Okay. So as a creative, we often deal with the frustration of fitting into a company and having your innovation devalued versus putting the work in and building your own. So what swayed you in the direction of freelance?
Sometimes just the fact, at first, it was probably more the fact that I had no clue how to go about getting in with agencies, and the companies that I would talk to, or the editors at companies I would talk to, would always tell me, and later in life when I met the homie Marcus Kaiser, they would always tell us like they didn't know what to do with our style of work. It was reflective of something that wasn't typical in the industry. So, you know, we'd have conversations and meetings and emails and phone calls and sit downs, and it would be the same thing every time. So it pushed my mind to kind of go in the direction of, I'm just going to go out here and find the people that relate to what I do. And that's when I started trying to get on the road and travel, started doing conventions and events and just setting up shop wherever, just to get my work out there, more so than my name. Just wanted my work to be seen and see what happened. We started organizing art shows, formed our own crew at the time, God City, which people thought was a religious church group, but it wasn't. You know what I'm saying? But it just became about how do you market yourself in a guerrilla tactical way to get out there in front of people. So freelance seemed like the opportunity to still have a certain amount of control, still have an income, and continue to grow, you know?
Mm-hmm. All right, so you just mentioned God City. Talk about the name, how you came up with it, some of the major players, and what it stood for, and the impact it had on Charlotte's art scene.
Man, so the core, there was 6 of us originally that would meet up and talk, but when the group was actually formed, it was 4 of us that were the founders, and that was Antoine Williams, John Harrison Jr., Marcus Kaiser, and myself. We just kind of built it out of a necessity, man. We would go to these art galleries and see work that, again, wasn't reflective of where we came from, wasn't reflective of the experiences of people beyond, you know, a certain group, the so-called elite. And even the idea of what fine art was, it was like, come on, man, like there's so much more to art than this. Why is this all that's shown, especially in our city? You know what I mean? So we used to watch, and according to who you talk to, you may get a slight different interpretation of where the name actually originated from, but we would watch the movie City of God all the time. Mm-hmm. And that movie had such an impact on us because it was reflective of where some of us came from, but it also showed hardships that went beyond where some of us came from. And then there was just this cool story wrapped up in all of it, and a certain beauty in the chaos. So we just started trying to figure out a name that would you know, resonate with people. And, you know, New York is the Big Apple, and everybody knows Atlanta and Texas and Georgia. So it's like, we want people to know Charlotte. So we kind of came up with the God City name, and the G.O.D mathematically aligns with the 704 area code of Charlotte. So G being the 7th letter, a circle being a circle being a complete cipher in life, and then D being the 4th letter. So that's where we got our G.O.D from, and then just through the city on the end. And we started running with it, man. We started branding ourselves. We started doing clothing and events and just whatever we felt like was missing, rather than wait or ask somebody to give it to us or help us. We just got out and started putting it together. That we felt like, why sit and wait and ask anybody for anything? We're overlooked anyway. We might as well go out here and make the noise ourselves. And that's what we started doing, bro. And then, you know, we were one of the first groups, because we come from where we come from. We tried to make sure, before being inclusive was cool, we tried to make sure that we found people whose voices weren't heard and gave them an outlet. Our first art show, we probably had about, I don't know, maybe like 15 or 20 artists, and we didn't ask them for a dime. We just said, bring your work to this gallery on this day. We paid for the gallery, we paid for the marketing, we handled all the promotion. All they had to do is show up with their work that told their story. You know what I'm saying? And we continue to do things like that throughout our time because we felt like it was just important. Everybody needed to be heard in some form of fashion, and representation was important, you know, which today we hear that even more than ever. But back then, that wasn't the case. We got told that one of the stories we always tell is being told by a gallery they couldn't afford security for us. You know, and I'm like, yo, it's an art show. This ain't a concert. This ain't, you know, no, whatever you think this is, like it's an art show. Would you tell anybody else that? No. But because it was 4 young Black guys talking about bringing people from a variety of backgrounds and voices together to do something, and our first show was called The Art of Hip Hop, it was automatically a negative connotation to them. You know what I mean? So we understood it. We just went and rented. We said, rather than ask for permission, we're going to rent places out and do what we want to do. And that's what we started doing.
Right. And I was going to ask you, like, whether or not all of the local galleries, for the most part, made it difficult for you guys to even, you know, gain any exposure, but you pretty much answered that already.
Yeah.
So you talked about the marriage of art and hip hop. But like I said earlier in the interview, I know you primarily from your you know, darts that you would throw behind the microphone with the QC hip hop scene as the champion of their Monday night mic fights. So just talk about the manifestation of the QC hip hop scene. The city had sort of a secret love affair with underground hip hop. And I think that yourself, along with others such as Eric Brayman and Ike Turner and numerous others, Trill, you sort of, you know, placed that front and center, gave us a home to come to every Monday night, and then bringing acts in for shows like Parrish Smith. So just talk about that.
Well, you know, I try to always give props to what came before, if I can. And, you know, before I really got active on the scene, there was Fat City, the original Fat City and Noda. And that's where you had groups like the Others, with DJ DR, Matic, Johnny Marek, and a ton of other cats that would come and perform and freestyle and do the same things, just a different environment at the time, you know. And I would go and peep that, check that out. But I was back and forth in and out of the city a lot at that time. So a lot of times I would just go and observe, you know what I mean? Then as time passed, Eric and Mike started working on this Monday night thing, and a friend called me like, yo, I know you rhyme and all that. You should go out and check this thing out. It's on Mondays though. Like, I know that's kind of crazy, you know, start of the work week, but hey, if you get there by a certain time, you get in free and then you get the rhyme and blah, blah, blah. So me being hungry and just wanting to sharpen my skills, I went, you know what I mean? And I never forget when the first few weeks of being there, it was all MCs and very little crowd. It was like 30 cats on stage, just trying to show that they was the most aggressive, nicest. And Ike Turner was one of those cats, the homie Ski, that just battling or just spitting verses, but it was like no real control. So everybody would just be trying to snatch that mic, and you realize real quick, because I never considered myself a battle MC, you know, but you realize real quick, if you didn't hold your ground, they was gonna move you out the way. And you might not, if you just sitting there like, please, sir, give me, like you weren't gonna get that mic. So I think that kind of birthed the scenario where cats would just come for each other. You know what I mean? Respectfully, but completely disrespectfully come for each other. And before you knew it, man, it went from mainly MCs with Eric and Mike, you know, encouraging to now there's sort of been people showing up and checking it out. And those numbers continue to grow and grow and grow to where it was packed out every Monday night. And then it got to a point where the buzz was growing. So people that were coming through to do other events would stop and come to the Monday night mic fights to either just check it out or to try to throw their best contender in the ring, you know, because back then cats really was rhyming. So somebody who was signed or about to sign or whatever would show up just to show that they could still spar with the underground talent, you know what I mean? Whereas today you probably wouldn't have certain cats doing that because their whole reputation would be destroyed if they took a L, you know, whatever. But that was the environment we was coming up in, man. And we'd have cats show up, bro, and you know, I mean, I remember one night somebody threw a few thousand down, like bets, like let's see who gonna walk out of here unscathed and who isn't. You know what I'm saying? So I think we all just learned and got stronger as creatives, as MCs, as artists from it. And for the most part, the thing I loved about it is, for years it was just a peaceful outturn, even when there was a little bit of ruckus or whatever here and there. You know, it stayed a peaceful and respectful thing, no matter what was going on, no matter how bad somebody got destroyed or whatever that night, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would remember like it would be after midnight and I knew I had to get up and go to work early in the morning. I was like, no, I'm staying till the end, till about 2 o'clock. But it also seemed like because of what you all built in Charlotte, it was sort of a bridge because you had Columbia's hip hop scene and then you had the Triangle, and they would just seem like they would all converge in Charlotte. Where I had friends from college that, you know, moved back home to Columbia. They drive down, spend a night at my place, and we, you know, come to the room, you know, for the freestyle.
I think the room, man, because you know we had like you mentioned Trill, you know, between school and bouncing back and forth, he was making his moves. We had people that were doing things, but most of the action was the Triad or, you know, the Triangle, Raleigh, Durham, everybody but Charlotte. You know what I'm saying? At one point, it just seemed like everybody would go around. You know, people would come to Charlotte because, hey, let's go over there and do a show and do what we do. But then they would go back to South Carolina or some other part of North Carolina or other parts of the country. But the room gave us the new, I mean, even predating that, rhythm and blues were cats that were doing their thing. But it's like when the room got established, it was that go-to place that everybody knew about. If you wanted to come and see DJs doing their thing, we got to the point where the B-boys and B-girls were coming out doing their thing, performances were happening, but then everybody just loved that freestyle session, that time when the mic opened up and people just did what they did. So it was like the art of it all. The only thing we were missing was somebody doing actual graffiti, you know, at the venue, you know what I mean? But it was just like people could come there and feel comfortable. And, you know, the room wasn't a big building, but it would stay packed out. And everybody, and even after it was shut down, the parking lot would stay packed for another hour or so afterwards. And people, like you said, people had to get up and go to work. So for them to stay meant they really enjoyed it, you know? And I do want to give a quick shout to my homie Point Game, rest in peace. He was I don't know if you ever got to see him, but he was another vicious MC that used to come through there. You know, he passed away a few years back, but
I didn't know that.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
So do you still have it in you to step in the ring and get on that battle rap circuit?
Ah, man, you know what? I rhyme about my son. He's into production and engineering, and just for the fun of it, me, him, and my daughter, and sometimes my wife, he'll throw a track on and we'll go in there and just freestyle, you know, or in the car listening to see how the sound came out. We'll freestyle. In my heart, I feel like I could still be Super Saiyan, Ultra Instinct Goku or something if I had to, if it was pushed, you know, but I'd never intentionally challenge or go after anybody because I feel like I just want to sit on the farm and feel the breeze and remember how it used to be when I would pull my sword and take on ninjas and samurais. You know what I mean?
Nice. So do you think there's still an outlet for underground hip hop in Charlotte?
I think so. I mean, I don't make it out before COVID. I didn't make it out a ton, and I'll be honest with you. Sometimes it was because I didn't know. Never because I doubted what I could possibly do if I did have to get on stage, but I never wanted to be in a situation where I went to support and then there was an expectation for me to do something I didn't have a passion for publicly doing anymore. So when Shadow and Shadow and them were doing like the nocturnals and those other things that were moving. I mean, it looked to me from a distance that people were still showing up, people were still coming out. And I don't, like I said, I never came out to them, but I would try to pass the word and show support where I could, but I think there's still an outlet, even though, music has changed greatly. I still think there's people that want Rolls Royces, there's people that want Chrysler 300s, and there's people that want the Honda Civic that they can hook up and it still be just as dope and valuable as any of those other cars named. So I think underground hip hop will always have a group of people who love it. It's just a matter of letting them know that it's there so they can come out and get to it, And I saw a few things happening that seemed like it was still keeping that tradition, that love, and that energy alive, before COVID hit. So we'll see what happens as the world figures out what it's going to be and how it's going to be hopefully leaving the COVID era.
Okay. So I wanted to show you this flyer.
Oh man. Yeah.
So
wow, you still got that? That's gotta be.
I save a little bit of everything. That's about 13, 14 years old, I think.
Gotta be at least, yeah.
So on it was saying that all proceeds go to Wolly Vinyl. So I know you had a situation where you had a fire, but I wasn't quite sure if it was to your home or your studio and you lost pretty much everything.
Yeah, so it was a lot of confusion about what was really going on because the media was being bullied. So what really happened was I'm from North Charlotte, and North Charlotte for the longest was predominantly Black until, of course, they decided they wanted to start buying up and changing and bringing in the banking and the whatever. So in North Charlotte, there were these mills that were pretty reasonably priced. The city didn't know what it really had in that building, I don't think, at the time. So people could move there and set up life, family, and whatever. So I lived there, Marcus Kaiser lived there, and a plethora of other creative people would get these loft type apartments and families. And one day they decided that now these buildings are historic mills, right? Predominantly brick, whatever. Mm-hmm. They come in one day and say, hey, the building is infested by termites. And the termites have destroyed the structure of the building so bad that if you stay in it, it's going to fall apart. You don't even have time to touch your stuff. You just got to go right now. And when they approached to tell us this, they had the police with them. So it was like, don't argue with us. Just grab what you need for the weekend and we'll figure the rest out next week. And that's just what it was. You just woke up one day. And of course, we knew it was BS. Like there was very little wood in the structure of these buildings. And the wood that was there had been treated with tar and whatever else from way back when to make sure it was strong, sturdy, whatever. So long story short, man, we found ourselves living hotel to hotel and wherever for a pretty good while we fought to get property back because they condemned the building. They quote unquote condemned the building, even though if you go by there today, they've renovated the whole place. This is years and years later. Renovated the whole place and they're selling and leasing them out for 10 times what we were paying back then to live there. And essentially, man, the hip hop community, the community as a whole, the skate community, hip hop, the arts, whatever, came together and started trying to find ways to help different groups of people because it was like 60 or 70 some households that were displaced from this situation. And as the media was trying to cover it, we started finding out real quick that people in positions of power started trying to downplay it and put things out there like the families are good, they're taking care of, I was an individual, so it wasn't as terrible for me as it was for some people who had wife, kids, granny, whoever, all staying on one roof, you know what I mean? But Eric and them came together with a few other hip hop heads and they organized and reached out to Lil Brother, Fonte Pooh, Ninth, like Kazi, like when you got the flyers, a ton of people.
Forge, Maze, Mr. Invisible, Pins and Needles, right. Ike, right. Charles Heron, Point Game, again, rest in peace, Next Level Records.
Yeah. And cats just came together, man, for the love of, which was a true testament of, some of these cats, we would go to war on the mic, but do anything for each other that we could within our power. Little brother came through. I think they were on tour and came off the road with their camp, you know what I'm saying, to come through and perform for free. Nobody asked for no pay. Nobody asked for nothing. As well as the Charlotte team that was there, you know what I mean? The South Carolina artists that were there, like everybody that showed up just off the strength of there's something happening. We can do something about it. You know what I mean? And even when the money was broke down to me, I broke that, what was given to me, down to 2 others who were living in the mills as well, because I wasn't the only one going through it, you know? So it was like, if we can share this in as many different directions as possible, then let's do it. So, bro, I'm not an emotional guy, but it was one of those things that was really like, I had the one tear trying to come down the eye. It was like, yo, Cats really showed up, you know what I'm saying? And I respect it, I appreciated it, you know?
Well, it was an amazing show, and I was, glad I could contribute however I could.
Hey, let me say thank you, man. I appreciate it.
No doubt, just like with this platform, you're always welcome.
Appreciate that, for real.
Yeah, so now let's get into basically what you're known for now, and that's Oncemperors.
Right.
Talk about the mission, empower, enlighten, elevate, and entertain through creative projects and endeavors.
Yeah. Man, so, music was always one outlet, one way to be creative and tell stories or battle or whatever, whatever it might have been. But art was always that other outlet where sometimes you could just give visuals and people can interpret it however they needed to, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But comics were always a way to get a message across, just like television, just like music, just like, film, whatever. So early on, again, we tried to get in with the Marvels and the DCs, and it just wasn't happening, man. We kept getting oh man, this is cool, but no. That was the conversation over and over. Me being either, greatly in tune with myself or completely insane. It's like, why am I waiting for these folks? I'm just gonna go put books out on my own. Who says I can't? You know what I mean? So when we found out how to get in touch with printers and the cost to get books done, bro, we just started creating our own stories and going out there and selling. The same way Wu-Tang or Master P or somebody was selling music out of their trunks, we were selling books. You know what I'm saying? And we would go to events, we would go wherever we could show up and try to get our stories in front of people. Our thing was just, we don't have to wait for the system. We'll do it ourselves. So Oncemperors was birthed years later out of, now I've been in a position where I've worked for different companies and the world has changed. So the way they looked at our work before, now it's like, oh, this is marketable. It appeals to a whole different audience we weren't reaching. So, I've been fortunate to work with a lot of companies on a lot of big projects and a lot of small projects, but I've always been big on ownership. So I don't mind working with other companies. It gets your name out there. It keeps income rolling. But at the same time, we all know when you own things that become successful, it's a different situation. It's a different feeling. It's a different way of establishing wealth for your family and things of that nature. So I decided I wanted to venture into, I was already self-publishing, but why not officially build your own publishing house and publishing brand that still stands on these principles that I attempt to live by every single day, you know what I mean? And I think through art and stories, you can enlighten and entertain. You can do both and find that balance with it. So that's, Oncemperors is all about us not forgetting who we once were. Right. You know what I mean? Us as Black people especially, but anybody who may sometimes forget who they've been, like, just don't forget the royal blood that flows through you, the person that you can be. Control your narrative, you know what I mean? Like, we can't forget, we can't believe we were slaves. Our life started as slaves and that was the end of it. Like, no, we were something before that and we shall continue to be something after that. That was one chapter of this great large story that existed. So I just wanted people to remember, when they see that logo, they identify it with something that's about standing on your principles, standing on your morals, and not forgetting who you are and what you represent. We still have fun too, but I do try to use some of the stories to tell, to speak, to be that voice. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. So like one of those projects you illustrated for was the Wilmington on Fire by Christopher Everett. We've been commemorating recently 100 years since Tulsa and the Black Wall Street. Just talk about your involvement and the long-term impact on the community of Wilmington.
Well, Wilmington on Fire was, man, Chris, I met Chris when he was straight up struggling to get that project going. You know, imagine being young, fresh out of film school, trying to work on something and you have no funding. So you're paying for everything out of your pocket and you start meeting and linking with people and y'all just kind of start figuring little things out here and there. Okay, we can do this, we can do that. And Chris came to me, he came to Marcus, and there may have been another artist involved and kind of gave us a vision of what he was aiming to do. I mean, I'm talking about he didn't even have editing software at the time. It was just, I'm gonna go get this footage, and whenever I find a way to edit, I'll edit some, and then I'm gonna get some more footage, and that's what he was doing. But bro believed in the vision, the same way we believed in what we were doing, and it was just that coming together of the different people in different positions, from music to, you know, because the soundtrack had a lot of people from Charlotte that was on it, and the engineers, and just he branched out, and we kind of formed something cool that has now turned into a whole other thing, because Chris has done several films since then. He's working on several films now, including a follow-up to Wilmington on Fire. And it all just started from that drive. I'm not going to wait for anybody, you know, and he wanted to tell that story that Black Wall Street was one of many situations that this country has had where people were building and establishing themselves. People don't even realize how powerful Wilmington was at one time, you know, and one of the most powerful Black newspapers came out of Wilmington, North Carolina, but they were burned out, literally. You know what I mean? And taken over. And if I'm not mistaken, one of the main papers there now benefited from that Black company being burned out. That put them directly in the spotlight of everybody has to come here to get news. So just wanted to make sure that those stories are told, not because we want people to feel bad. We just want people to see the way that this history and this system continues to stay in play. Even though we're talking years and years, 50, 60, 70, 100, however many years later, these rules haven't changed very much. And the infrastructure hasn't changed very much. So, you know, when you hear Bill Maher or somebody like that talking about we should be happy because we can drink out of water fountains with everybody, or we should accept that change has happened, like, come on, bro. Like, we're still fighting an overall structure. And if we had been left alone during the Wilmingtons and the Tulsas and the whatevers, we could be so much more in this country, but y'all didn't want that. So every time we built it, you came and tried to destroy it. And now you expect us to just be happy with the fact that we can share a water fountain. No, we're not about that. That's not what it is. You know what I mean? So Wilmington was an important film, and it's doing festivals, and I think it's on a few streaming platforms now. But it still, I feel like, hasn't been where it needs to be for what it is. And a lot of that's because I know what Chris went through to get this thing off the ground from the beginning. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of people would have quit a long time ago and just been like, you know what? I'm gonna go make a movie about something else because that will sell for sure. You know what I'm saying? I mean, death threats coming because of doing this film. People telling him, hey, y'all are disturbing the balance. Well, you know, it's peaceful right now. We Black people in some occasions saying, don't put this movie out. We shouldn't talk about this. Like, let's not stir things up. What? We talk about everybody else's history all the time. We've been teaching the same. I looked at my daughter's schoolwork before school ended. I'm looking at some of the stuff they're showing in social studies, which me and my wife educate them beyond school anyway. But I'm looking at the lessons, and I'm like, these are the same lessons I learned in school. Ain't no more history being created since I was a kid. like what are we doing? You know what I'm saying? Like, no. So yeah, man, not to go on a tangent, but yeah, Wilmington on Fire is one of many major stepping stones into telling these stories and making sure that these realities are understood, so people can stop being upset when we say, yo, structure needs to change. So people can understand when we say, yo, we have a voice, but you don't want it heard, and stop telling us to forget. We can't forget because these things are still in play. like Malcolm said, the 60s, they'll pacify you all day before they'll give you, I'm paraphrasing, before they'll give you what you're really asking for. So you got to go out here and get it, you know?
Yeah. So footnote, I work at UNC Chapel Hill. So
okay.
You know what's going on with Nicole Hannah-Jones and the 1619 project and the board not giving her tenure, you know, so
yeah.
I mean, yeah, we're still having to fight to get our truth out, as you said.
Which is crazy, right? It's ridiculous, bro. Or maybe it's not crazy. Maybe
it's not surprising. It's not surprising.
Yeah.
All right. So you mentioned, you know, that you and Marcus, you know, decided to just go ahead and put out your own projects, especially like comic books and photo books. Let's just talk about a few of them. You have Josie and the Pussycats. You got Skull Kids, Legend of the Black Pandas. How do you and Marcus like collaborate?
Well, it varies a lot now because Marcus has kind of transitioned more into graphic design. He's doing a lot of things as far as trying to change the art structure in the city by infiltrating, kind of becoming the spook that sat by the door and infiltrating. I probably should have said it out loud because now people might be calling him like, yo, you trying to infiltrate? But, you know, infiltrating the other side of the decision-making process and trying to see and be in on meetings and on boards and whatever. He's also doing a lot of mural projects. But what we often do, and what we really used to do a lot back then, is one of us might come up with a story, a concept, we'll talk about it, swap ideas with it, and then we'll exchange the work. He may do part of the story, I do part, or he may do graphic design, I may do illustration, or he may do covers, I do interiors. And we would just swap things back and forth. And that's how we would, you know, keep the structure within our circle of, hey, let's utilize the talents we have so that we don't have to put money outside of the circle. And then when the money circulates back in, it stays within the same unit. You know what I mean? So we would do that a lot with different things. The Josie cover was, anybody that remembers Archie, the old Archie cartoons and all that stuff, like Archie comics. Rebel Base and Archie reached out to me to do a variant in the world of comics. For those that don't know, you'll have a book that comes out with one cover. The comic companies got smart and said, well, how can we make one book sell 20 different times? Let's hire different styled artists to bring different style covers. And then that same book can sell multiple times over. And that's how you get your 20, 30, 40,000 in sales for a book. And so variants are very collectible. A lot of people love collecting every one that comes out. They were relaunching Josie and the Pussycats. They had just did the TV show. And so they were looking for different artists to do different covers for that #1. And I was fortunate to be, you know, picked to come in and do a cover, which Josie isn't my typical style of work personally. It was an interesting thing that I was considered for it, but it was like, cool, I'm not going to turn down outlets and opportunity. Let's do it. You know what I mean? So yeah. That was one of a few during that time period. Yeah.
What adjustments did you have to make then, since it wasn't your preferred style?
Man, just rethinking, because at the time when that cover was being worked on, a lot of people were coming to me for more or less aggressive, action-packed type things. So it was like, you know, these are 3 women who are part of a band, and there's an energy and action to it, but not necessarily in the way that I would typically approach certain pieces. So it was like, yo, let's kind of do something that has a little beauty, I guess a little grace, but at the same time can show the strength of these 3 women, but doesn't come across in a, oh, they're finna fight type way. You know what I mean? Like that just kind of. So, but the thing with doing these covers too, you don't normally have the final say on what cover goes out. So typically you'll do 2 or 3 sketches. They'll look at those, and whoever runs the company, has ownership, whatever, will pick which one they feel like works the most, and that's the one that ends up being finalized and turned to a cover. So, you know.
All right. So with the Oncemperors brand, just talk about the services you provide.
Man, so I mean, the main focus right now is putting out books, like creative content, you know, comic books, graphic novels, also, and eventually leading into animation and film with some of the content that we have, which, I mean, nowadays almost everything that's coming out is comic based in some form or fashion, it seems. But also, we used to do consulting whenever people wanted to come up with marketing plans for projects, especially when they wanted to market things beyond the typical, here's an ad, or, you know, here's a poster or flyer. So, and also running Kickstarters and Indiegogo campaigns, because a lot of people want to do their own things independently, but they don't always understand the process or how to go about it. So I try to give as much free info as I can. And then also we try to get together and do consultations for companies or individuals who are looking to launch new projects, looking to take on new things. The last project I put out, the last project I helped consult with raised about 10,000 for a fairly new book, which in our world, if you can do 10,000 in pre-orders for a book that no one is really knowing about, that's pretty good, you know what I'm saying? So I think we used to do like 2,000 and 3,000 per book, and now we're hitting the 7, 10. I think the next one will probably do a good 15, 20,000 in pre-orders. So our whole thing is just starting to build our brand and our content so that we can provide outlets and opportunities for others, provide other ways for people to learn to do their thing, and also start negotiating bigger situations, because we built the content, we built the following, and we've shown we have the numbers to compete, whether it be on a small scale or a large scale. Like we're really pushing to show that what we're saying and doing has a value, because there's that stigma. Until Black Panther came out, they loved saying Black content can't sell. Well, there's a lot of other white content that didn't sell well either, but you still kept putting content out and creating until you found audiences for it. And that's how it typically works. You know, the Snuggie was a joke until they sold $1 million worth of, you know what I'm saying?
Mm. Yeah. So one of the upcoming projects that you raised money for was the King Supreme.
Yeah.
Is there any date pretty much set yet? For that and Super Bastard?
Yeah, so currently, if anyone wants to get the prelude book for King Supreme, it's up and available on our website. I think it's a 32-page book that kind of opens up the foundation for the King Supreme story. We did the last Kickstarter for King Supreme and Super Bastard for the graphic novel. So King Supreme will be 100 pages, and Super Bastard was scheduled to be 60 pages, but it's now looking like it'll be closer to 80. Just because sometimes in the process of working on books, you'll realize, oh, I want to put this in there, or you'll trim some things down and add some things back to it. So originally both books were supposed to release this month, but between COVID, shipping, printing, and me just reworking certain things in the stories and whatever, I'm now looking at pushing them back until maybe the fall or early winter, just because at this point in life, anything that I'm actually drawing, I really want to see it elevate from the last thing that I did and the last thing that I did to hopefully where people can look at it and see the growth in the storytelling and the growth in the art. But Super Bastard is, just to give a quick synopsis, it's pretty much my take on what it would have been like if Superman had been Black, which I always felt like if you pull energy from the sun, he should have been Black anyway, because, you know, melanated people kind of do that. But no disrespect to Superman, just saying scientifically that would have made more sense, but cool. So Super Bastard is his story follows him going through the different phases of life, believing the lie, realizing the reality, and then figuring out what to do about it. He grows up thinking the world is one way. When he realizes what it really is, he kind of makes the choice to do something about it. What can be done to change the structure and the system of the world? It definitely, in his mind, it's not asking, it's not begging, it's not pleading. He's going to meet power with power. And absolute power will either corrupt or attempt to straighten out the process. But you watch him go through that process of figuring this out, and then you watch the results of taking the course of action he chooses to take. And, you know, for the record, I'm not telling anybody to do anything dangerous, crazy, or destructive. I'm just telling a story about if you had godlike powers and no one could really stop you, how would you use it to make a difference in this world? Because Superman never came down and saved just regular folks that was going through some crazy racist things, or, you know, he might have got a cat out of a tree or something, but that's about it. He was always fighting the other things. So Super Bastard's different in that accord, you know?
Yeah, that's Wolly utilizing those critical thinking skills from the Art Institute of Charlotte.
Right.
So as we prepare to close out, definitely talk about the merchandise you have in the store, other projects on the horizon, plug your socials, the whole nine.
Yeah, man. First and foremost, again, I greatly appreciate being able to be on, bro. I appreciate you taking the time, not letting me be buried in the past of the past. Um, yeah, so in the midst of doing everything with the Oncemperors, I'm big on branding, and I feel like everything that we're doing, we try to make sure it connects to people beyond. So King Supreme, that story is all about having faith and belief in yourself. His powers they come from an ancient crown, and that crown has the knowledge of all those who wore it before him. But there are 6 other crowns out in the universe and different planets and different places. But his is the Earth crown. And the crown itself is supposed to be a symbol of having faith in yourself. His powers are based on him believing in himself. If he doubts himself, he becomes weaker. And if he keeps that faith and that belief, he can almost accomplish anything. But it also talks about the parallels that you go through trying to do the right thing. A lot of villains are only villains based on perspective. People villainize Malcolm X because he said by any means necessary, but they love Martin Luther King because he said turn the other cheek. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, Malcolm was just saying, yo, you're not gonna hit me and my people when we not do nothing about it. That doesn't really make you a villain. According to who's watching, somebody else is gonna see him as a hero. Same thing with Fred Hampton and many others. So King Supreme deals with those parallels. The beings in our book, we don't call them villains. I mean, we call them antagonists. There's protagonists and antagonists, but which one you stand behind may be based on your perspective of their life and what they've had to endure to get to where they are. So with the clothes, we use the crown. I normally would have a shirt or something on, the plug and whatever, but we use that crown logo on a lot of the clothes because we want people to harness. We say harness your crown and own your destiny. So when you put that crown on, you're saying, I'm going to harness the powers that come with this, and I'm going to control my destiny. So a lot of the clothes are based on that. We also have a lot of stuff that is just, cool designs, our Tiger logo, the Black Betty Boo t-shirts, Forever Queen t-shirts. All of it is about having a good time, pride, power, and just owning who you are. You know what I mean? And then we, of course, have our books, and we, of course, have pillows and cool art posters and things of that, and on the website. So Oncemperors.com, you can go and check out whatever is still currently in stock, because thankfully people have been supporting and rocking with me. So I sell out of certain things and got to regroup and put them in. But it's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, thanks to the digital world of the internet.
Yep. And I personally love the Boogie Boop and the Doom Face.
So, yeah, man. Yeah. MF Doom and Ghostface represent a certain era, bro, that I think will always be a classic when it comes to hip hop. You know what I mean? So I had to pay a little bit of homage to it. And actually, we had an art show that was supposed to happen, and that was where that piece originated from. We was kind of just going to pay homage to just that dope, classic underground hip hop world. And things didn't quite work out with the location we was trying to set everything up in. So we decided, let's just regroup. We don't want to do it on the terms that don't make sense to us. So between now and 2022, and plus with COVID, it was like we really want to make it an event where people come out and just have a great time. They can see art. Hopefully you gain something from it, and you just come back home with a good experience. So we're planning to push for it next year, because by then, hopefully, the world will be a little more normal and we can do it on the terms that we want, So yeah.
Yep. So ladies and gentlemen, Wolly McNair, aka Wolly V, aka Wolly Vinyl, www.oncemperors.com. On IG, you can find them at Wolly V.
You told me to plug that, and I got too busy talking. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Twitter, Wolly Vinyl.
Oh, for the record, the Twitter, I don't even control that anymore. I don't know who has that Twitter now. So if you see something weird on Twitter, it's not me anymore. I'm not sure who is there.
So X that out. Just follow them on IG. And
yes, sir.
Go to the store, check out the merch. And sir, I applaud you. I thank you for your time. Appreciate all of your contributions to the culture over the last we might as well say 20 years now.
Yeah,
So,
I'm young. I'm getting young, man. I'm getting young out here. Yeah.
yeah. So, man.
I appreciate you so much, bro. It
All right,
means a
man.
ton to me. If you ever need me, hit me up, bro. I'm here.
No doubt. You stay blessed, stay creative, and stay independent.
Indeed. Peace, bro.
All right. So for Stop, Look, and Listen, I'm your host, LaTroy Gardner. See you next week. Peace and blessings.
Thank you for checking us out on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe for more great content. And don't forget to check us out on social media at GOB Radio Network.